Welcome, and thank you all for joining us tonight for a very special learning lab as we gather here for nature, for every community, faith, equity, and belonging in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it's important to remember that access to nature has never been equal. For generations, many Black, Indigenous, and marginalized communities have been pushed out of natural spaces, unfortunately, through segregation, assimilation, and policies that have restricted access to parks, green space, and even environmental careers. So those patterns still shape who has tree canopy, clean air, a true sense of welcome even today. And so while congregation's history might include some moments of silence or even participation in some of these harms, faith communities have also been among the strongest and most critical moral leaders for justice, from the civil rights movement to present. Today, that calling still continues. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the recent decisions like ending free entry to national parks on MLK Day. It was something that my family always looked forward to. So it reminds us that the work is far from finished. Environmental equity is civil rights. And congregations, again, you can be the lead. So we're going to talk about how you can open your grounds, planting native gardens, restoring creation, and ensuring every neighbor has a place to breathe, heal, and belong. And before we take a deep dive into this topic with our honorable keynote speakers, we're going to just go over this brief tech orientation for even our seasoned folks in the room, just to ensure a pleasant experience for everyone. We'll ask that you please keep yourself muted during the presentation. There will be Q&A, so there'll be time at the end of this program where we can talk to our speakers and ask questions. If you need help, you can use the chat feature to direct message any of our IPC staff for assistance. And again, this session is being recorded, so please keep your camera off if you don't want to have your image shown or if you need to get up and move around the room to prevent distraction. So next, we're going to take a look at tonight's program lineup. We're going to get a chance to look at our staff for some new folks in the room. And so we're going to breeze through the staff photo because I know there are a lot of familiar faces in the room. It really just has my contact information, but at the end, folks know where to find me, and I will have my contact information along with all the keynote speakers today. And if you want to reach out to your regional coordinators from other folks that may be joining from different regions, as we can see here tonight, you'll be able to get in touch with all of us post this program. And so we'll talk about the program lineup while we're waiting for our opening reflection. Per usual, we always open with either a reflection or a grounding prayer. I have a beautiful one from the Ute tribe that's going to just ground us on listening to the earth. Perfect for tonight's program. Then you'll see that we have a program lineup, and you'll get to meet our speakers, hear their wonderful presentations. We'll have some Q&A. And then again, we will close with a prayer, which will be actually a Jewish prayer for the earth. It's very short and sweet. And as we're moving to the prayer slide, I will just start. This is a native Maryland tree, and this is actually in winter. This is a beautiful tree. So this is Earth Teach Me. Earth teach me quiet as the grasses are still with new light. Earth teach me suffering as old stones suffer with memory. Earth teach me humility as blossoms are humble with beginning. Earth teach me caring as mothers nurture their young. Earth teach me courage as the tree that stands alone. Earth teach me limitation as the ant that crawls on the ground. Earth teach me freedom as the eagle that soars in the sky. Earth teach me acceptance as the leaves that die each fall. Earth teach me renewal as the seeds that rises in the spring. Earth teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. And earth teach me to remember kindness as dry fields weep with rain. So thank you for taking that moment of reflection with me. Now we just want to shift gears and share a little bit of our gratitude for all of our funders and supporters. We couldn't do this work without you. And as you can see on the next slide, all of our wonderful partners give us the capacity to operate as a connector organization. So on the next slide, you'll see this really cool puzzle pieces that kind of show where IPC stands in the middle of our environmental partners, our local governments, and faith communities. Next, we want to take a moment to remind folks, this is one of my favorite newer slides. Think of it as we're all in the same bathtub, right? From many that might know, I'm sure many of us here do know, but some are quite surprised to find out, especially in the DMV area, the Chesapeake Bay is actually a source of drinking water for us. It's the largest estuary in our country and the third largest global. It is a huge resource and it crosses over 6 states. And as you can see, your backyard is connected. So we always like to remind folks what you're doing upstream affects those downstream. We've already shared many times before Wendell Berry's famous quote, do unto others, or downstream as you've had others do upstream unto you. It's just kind of a twist on the golden rule. And so now if you want to find out about who's doing this work already to protect the Bay and who's partnering with us, you can learn about our One Water partnership and sign our pledge. And there are some links coming in the chat. It'll just take you to a landing page so you can join other congregations throughout the shared watershed and put yourself on the map like all these lovely folks did. We also want to mention for any of our green teams out there that we do have a training. On our next slide, you'll see that it's coming up very quickly in March. We've trained over 230 teams and they've taken nearly 1,000 actions. So we're hoping you'll join that cohort in March if you haven't already. And last, if you're looking for a place to start, please check out our resource page. It's a great foundation where you can get congregational action kits, liturgical resources, and free trees. And we'll send those links post this recording so you can fill out a form if you'd like to get trees for your congregation. All right, I've talked enough. Let's delve straight into the heart of tonight's discussion, the topic of tonight's webinar, Nature for Every Community. We are honored to have two amazing keynote speakers tonight. And first, we will welcome the Executive Director of the Children's Environmental Health Network. It's a national nonprofit working to protect kids from environmental hazards by influencing policy, supporting science, educating stakeholders, promoting environmental justice, focusing on issues like air quality, clean water, climate change, and toxic-free products, recognizing children's unique vulnerability due to their developing bodies. They advocate for systemic changes, ensuring children's needs are central to this movement as we're talking about green spaces for everyone and access. So I will let Ensei, if you want to unmute, please go ahead and let's spotlight you real quick so I can give you the floor. She's championed this work for many decades. So please, everyone, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's an honor to be here tonight with all of you, and I think very fitting on this Martin Luther King Jr. observed holiday. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know we've got short amount of time, but it's a pleasure and an honor. Hopefully everyone's seeing the slides okay? Okay. So I call on a lot of inspiration, a lot of different ways, meditation, prayer, and also our ancestors before us. Today, I'm calling on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and one of his many quotes, join with earth and each other to bring new life to the land, to restore the waters, to refresh the air, to renew the forests, to care for the plants, to protect the creatures, to celebrate the seas, to rejoice in the sunlight, to sing the song of the stars, to recall our destiny, to renew our spirits, to reinvigorate our bodies, to recreate the human community, to promote justice and peace, to love our children, and to love one another, to join together as many and diverse expressions of one loving mystery for the healing of the earth and the renewal of all life. I hope that gives us a little bit of grounding here. Oops. Did I just change the format? Y'all are good? Okay. I just moved this behind. For some reason, the my screen changed, so let me just change my view again. Okay.
Yeah, I think Sarah, you want to switch back to her slides?
There we go. Okay, our mission is to protect all children. This is the Children's Environmental Health Network from the changing climate and environmental hazards. And those are found in many different formats of what a child encounters. And mom's womb is the very first environment. So, what mothers, parents, and even grandparents are exposed to is extremely important. Our mission has been the same for over 3 decades. We are considered the leader in this movement. There's no other organization like ours, and we take that responsibility extremely seriously. We promote preventive research and stimulate the research, and we coordinate research centers in the country. A lot of our work is translating available science into what does it mean for all of us? How do all of us as advocates, as residents, as protectors and champions of children and life help to take what we know, what we've learned, the harms of the past to not perpetuate those harms. And we do a lot of education and training like we're doing today. And we also work on child protective policies. Our headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and we moved here in 2000 after starting in California. I think there's a little delay in advancing the slide. There we go. So we know globally 1 in 4 deaths among children younger than 5 are associated with polluted environments. So already that's the foundation. It's not a good one, it's the foundation. Children's environments, their surroundings. A lot of us spend a lot more time indoors than we should. And so the reality is the indoor air, the indoor exposures mean a lot to the development of a child. So children's exposures are just like us as adults: air, water, food, consumer products that many of them are obviously putting in their mouth often or coming into contact with, their bedding, their furnishing, the flooring, the rugs, the built and natural environment. All of these have positive and or can have negative impacts on the natural health and development of a child. Children are not little adults. So we say that because we cannot treat them like they are one of us. Their little brains are still developing. Their little respiratory systems are still developing, right? Their lungs are extremely vulnerable for many, many months. The brain is still developing into toddler years, if you can believe that. So their unique exposures and the fact that they're intaking more breaths of air per minute compared to adults, that's a lot of air pollution coming in, even more than us. They have longer life expectancy, so there's a longer period of time, unfortunately, for chemicals that were never really meant to ever enter a little human system to cause more harm over time. And they cannot advocate for themselves, right? There are many incredibly talented leaders that are not toddler age, right? But the youngest of our children certainly cannot do this on their own. They have to rely on us to be the stewards that we need to be. Okay. So here's another set of realities of what children are looking at, a range of pesticides, which are neurodevelopmental delay causers, right? They're changing the normal function of the brain forever. Pounds and pounds of these. We know that 30 million children live in areas with poor air quality. At least 30 million homes are considered unhealthy, and those are the ones that have just gone through programs and assessment. 95% of baby foods hold toxic metals. And we could go on and on. The bottom line here is that anywhere from 84 to 95, I've seen a range of thousands of synthetic chemical ranges are entering into the normal structure and exposure and life cycle of a child on any given day. We know that from existing science and lived experience that of 25 to 40% of the disease burden, so chronic illnesses, of which many children are dealing with not just one, but multiple at this day and time, have an association with environmental links anywhere from 25 to 40%. That's a huge number. It's not genetics that those associations are being made. There's many more things happening out here in children's environments that we need to take heed of. I unfortunately use this graph often. I think when Sarah and I met at Prince George's County event before the end of last year, I also used this slide because I want to see in my lifetime this slide changing and reversing altogether. These are the major chronic illnesses that children face. There are many subsets of them, but these are unfortunately going all the wrong way, as you can see. In that sense, a lot of these have been keeping records, sometimes the 70s, the end of the 90s. Childhood cancers continue to increase on an annual basis for the last 50 years, the year I was born. Again, that's not how genetics move. So I keep saying, unfortunately, our children are showing us also that they are not exactly doing that well. 34% of increase of childhood cancer since we've been keeping track. At least 10% of school-age children in the US have some form of asthma. Asthma has many confounding reasons that one child will have it versus another in the same classroom or home. But environmental components, allergens, those that irritate the upper respiratory system, like air pollution, are certainly a big factor. And we know that 1 in 34 8-year-old boys in the US now have a diagnosis of autism. When I started this work over 20 years ago, that number was that gap was much more. It has almost doubled, reduced its size in the last 20 years since I've been also tracking. Again, many confounding reasons for autism, but the environmental component should not be forgotten. Okay. I want to just pause for a minute and just make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding that we are here for all children, and we believe that all children have the right to grow up in an environment that nurtures their souls, their development, their well-being, their happiness. And it's not lost on us that, unfortunately, through many practices, just starting with the United States over years, the legacy of ill practices and racially motivated practices have also continued to cause a subset of children to be at even higher risk than the average child. So you have the foundation of where they are globally. You got the foundation of where they are as far as their development and their little systems and their behaviors. And then on top of that, with many other indicators, you have other children that are higher risk than the others. It's a very, very challenging platform for sure. And this is called environmental racism. So any environmentally related policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages an individual, a group, or community based on race and color, that's the fundamental bottom line of environmental racism. Usually, it's not too unfounded to find that if you are also dealing with a situation where environmental racism has caused some extremely negative implications on that of you and your family, your children, you may also be oppressed in many other ways. You may be food insecure, housing insecure, employment insecure, extremely worried about your health care and paying for copays and beyond, and even having health care, economic insecurity, and of course, not to be lost, childcare and K through 12 insecurity. Childcare is extremely expensive. We learned, I think, very well during the COVID pandemic of how desperately working families depend on childcare. And what we need is childcare to be open, but to be open in a healthy and safe manner as well. Same thing with K through 12 schools, where majority of US children spend their time. This is a report that I have the honor of writing with Jackie Patterson, who's the head of the Chisholm Legacy Project. And we wrote this during the height of the COVID pandemic, and it is free and available. You can scan this barcode, or you can find it just on our website, or you can just Google the name and it comes up on either of our sites. It's called Racism That Appends the Cradle. And we thought it was very important to pull together existing resources and data and information on how Black and Brown children are differentially vulnerable to the impacts of this endemic. Our definition of this endemic is the economic disinvestment over decades in particular communities, COVID-19 pandemic, again, impacting specifically even higher risk for certain communities, and the impacts of climate change. In that report, we really get into some of the legacies of environmental racism. Some examples, sadly, that I think a lot of us can relate to: the Flint water crisis definitely had a strong, or has had still, an environmental racism tone to it. In Flint, Michigan, the public water supply was switched over to the Flint River without proper treatment, communication, transparency. There were some people that even unfortunately went to jail as a result of this over the years. Residents who were mostly Black and Brown, low income, were exposed to lead-contaminated drinking water knowingly, highlighting government negligence and environmental racism. And this has happened well within our lifetime. This isn't something that unfortunately happened, decades ago. So sadly, there are still these very current accounts that we find all too often, where communities, and certainly the children and other vulnerable populations like the elderly, the immunocompromised, are put at risk. Redlining, for example, is also talked about in our report. That was a discriminatory practice starting in the 1930s, where bankers, insurers, and the federal government denied loans and services to businesses and homeowners simply on the basis of race and social economic status. So when you make those kind of decisions, fundamentally, over decades of time, families are then blocked from home ownership and any opportunity for generational wealth, and that perpetuates. So although this was banned by the Fair Housing Act of 1968, the implications, unfortunately, are still very much founded today. For example, we know now that our zip code can actually carry more weight on our potential health than that of our genetic code. We're also living through the first generation of our lifetime to be forecasted to not be as healthy or healthier than the generations before them. With modern technology and advancement in medical advancement, we should be going the opposite way. And I should just say on cancer, for example, yes, we have more children living through cancer diagnosis, but that is not a walk in the park, right? We still have many children dealing with a wealth of other issues. It would be much, much better, obviously, if we could reduce the incidence in the very first place. But if you notice here, the red, which is the highest concerning areas of the country, also aligns, if I was to do an overlap, with a lot of where our heavier industry practices are as well, and other polluting sources. So one of many exposure considerations as to why one zip code can have a negative impact on our health and lifespan. Just looking at polluted air as one indicator, we know that there's a higher incidence of premature death among Black and Brown children. We also know Black and Brown women during pregnancy experience higher risks than other pregnant women when exposed to a consistent exposure route of polluted air. We know that people of color are 64% more likely than white people to live in a county with a failing grade for at least one measure of health polluted air, and then many more after that. And this comes from the American Lung Association, which puts out a state of the air report every year, and it's one we really look to. It's highly well science-based. So you have all these layers, right? And then on top of that, you have the impact of the climate crisis and all that comes with that. And that could be a 2-3 hour talk on its own. So I won't go into that, but I would be remiss if I don't at least acknowledge, I'm trying to just paint the picture here that our children, before they even take their first breath, before they then even enter into their first kindergarten classroom, have so many challenges, unbeknownst to them, not created by them or their families in any intentional way, but the realities are here. And what I say often is that there may not be any greater crisis or threat to that of a child's health and well-being than that of the implications of climate change, because it exacerbates all the other negative implications. We escalate greenhouse gas emissions we're seeing from burning of fossil fuels and increasing a range of environmental health risks, especially to vulnerable populations. We see extreme weather events. I mean, no matter where you are in the world, we all are seeing this, right? You're seeing higher incidence of more extreme storms. You're seeing more flooding. You're seeing higher heat index, heat waves, flash floods, wildfires. And with all that comes additional residual implications, economic implications. Schools are closed down for long periods of time, and childcare, infectious disease, I mean, on and on. So while that's impacting the entire community, it certainly is not lost, including mental health challenges, on what children are seeing and experiencing as well. Children are particularly vulnerable to climate change because, again, some of them are losing their lives or experiencing severe injuries, trauma, mental health concerns, watching what's happening, again, to their families and friends and loved ones. You're talking about food and water shortages and energy concerns. Again, closing of places that they love and where they have their social network the most, childcare and schools, and then the economic stress that's placed on their families. So I'm not trying to bring us down, but I think it's very important to just be honest of where we are. Children and families and our collective communities are shouldering a lot. So what can we do? There's a lot we can do. Our vote matters. Our voices matter. Our spheres of influence matter. The work that you all are doing here and within your specific congregations and communities all matters. I first just want to acknowledge there's an abundance of science and lived experience to show us that time outdoors, time in nature, time in green space matters. It doesn't have to be so crafted. It doesn't have to be so professional. It can simply just be a safe space for children to run around and be a kid. And by the way, it's not just kids, it's all of us. There's an abundance of science that shows reduced anxiety, reduced stress. It may not take all of it away, but for moments of time, the more that we can increase those interactions, the stress levels, the anxiety, and maybe not always having to rely on other ways to help to treat the increased stress that people are feeling every day. These are very naturally built-in ways that we were always intended to connect with nature. A colleague of mine, Dr. Luz Claudio at Mount Sinai, actually says we need a prescription for children in nature. So how do we think about renaturalizing school spaces and promoting greener school environments? Many who have the means have been very creative creating outdoor classrooms, even though they're shelters, even when the rain comes, and getting kids intentionally out into nature on trails. And then there's other communities that don't have the funds or resources. And let's just face it, there's many other barriers. There's concern about crime. There's concern about transportation. But that should not be the barrier, right? We should be taking advantage. Our elected officials should be taking advantage and listening as to what others and neighbors and other counterparts are doing so that we can all learn about how to overcome what could be very real challenges, especially in communities of color and low-income communities. Also, an example I want to give is in childcare. We know that there's anywhere from 13 million plus-ish numbers of children in the US in some form of childcare nationally, spending up to 10 hours, 5 days a week. In the DC area, there's 24-hour childcare due to the military and people who work for the federal government in certain sectors. So it is an extremely important part of a child's awareness and environment. So our Eco Healthy Childcare program is the only of its kind in the country. We're working to train and educate childcare professionals on low to no cost steps that they can take to protect their environments. This is something that they're not trained on normally, right? How to think about the cleaners that you're using. Do you really need to use those ones laden with all those chemicals? Here are some alternatives. We don't get into shopping for them. We just enlighten and educate them so that they can make better decisions. Many of the employees of childcare facilities are women of childbearing age. Most childcare in the US is in a home. So you have the co-benefit of the home environment as well as the business, the small business being better off, the air being cleaned up, and other practices that are enhancing and helping overall. One way within this program that we're working in communities across the country, we're working on an air quality initiative. So we're working with environmental justice community partners on the ground in 7 states. Well, 6 states and the city of San Francisco, so 7 locations. They're receiving a $1,000 mini grant to look at what they would like to enhance. Maybe they want to change out some of the toys. Maybe the toys have lead or they're getting old, and obviously kids put them in their mouth all the time. Some of them have put this investment towards updating their HVAC system, because we know good ventilation really helps to reduce mold, mildew, and helps to really get pollutants out of the area. We're setting up air monitors for them so that they can see in real time what's happening in my facility. It's not about going to the media. It's not an I got you moment. It is honestly just, we all need to have a sense of what is happening so that we can better assist you in giving you recommendations on maybe where to spend your time and capacity and hard-earned money. So we're giving them technical advice, education, but also investing a bit in some capital improvements, and it's already working. In San Francisco, the Low Income Investment Fund has been able to find these testimonies that breathing is a little bit better. They're not taking their medicines as much. There's others that are saying that their children are not absent as much. They're not having as many asthma episodes. This is all very positive, and just by increasing their education on where the exposure pathways are, low to no cost ways that they can change their behavior a little bit, and then also setting up the air monitor and a purifier to help them in real time so that they don't have to worry about how they can find money to then help clean up their air a little bit. In Detroit, Michigan, the Green Door Initiative is also working with us, and their providers have also seen positive changes around their facility with products or things that they use on their playground to make sure that their environment is the safest possible, because they know that a safe environment promotes learning. So again, education is empowering meaningful change in a sector that otherwise has not been able to get this kind of information in the past. In Flagstaff, Arizona, we're working with the Institute of Tribal Environmental Health Professionals. So one provider working in tribal communities was happy to, with their air purifier so much that they ended up using their mini grant funds to purchase additional purifiers for each of their classrooms. And they're excited to see the differences in their own breathing and their own activity and their energy, and also what they're seeing in their children. So demonstrating our partnership and demonstrating that we're here for them and demonstrating that we're trying to set up something that's cost effective that they can use long term, because this equipment will be left with them. We're not leaving them when our program is over. And best practices for shade and design, right? We're working on indoor and outdoor environments. We know that trees and shade structures reduce exposure to direct sunlight. They lower the risk of heat exhaustion and sunburn. They lower UV radiation and exposure by 75%. So the last thing we want to do is tell providers or parents or teachers, don't take your kids outside. Sometimes the air is so bad. Unfortunately, we've all been through, I'm sure, wildfire or other situations where those are extreme situations. But on a given day, as the climate is changing, and while many of us are still trying to work on the original reasons for climate change, children and facilities and students and teachers need help today. Parents need help today. So we try to give them, think about what's happening. Are you near a high traffic thoroughfare? When is the sun the peak? The highest peak sun hours are 10 a.m. to 4. How can you maybe adjust your schedule a little bit so you and the children still get out, hopefully multiple times a day, but don't, not take them out. And that may mean rethinking shade opportunities for the design of your facility and or your home or school. So bottom line for me, there's a lot more I could say, but I also want to give time for our next speaker. We have a children's environmental health movement. We're here to make sure that all children have the right to the safest and healthiest environments possible to live to their full potential. And we're going to keep at it. And we welcome everyone possible to join us. We have lots of different ways that you can do that. And I think we're putting in the chat ways that you can join our communication to learn more. And we are honored to just be here of service to all of you. And this is just a few of the millions of reasons every day I get up. 4 of these are my children, and the rest of these are all network children. They inspire us. The children we'll never meet in the world inspire us. It's just, I'm extremely passionate about being a voice for children when they've done nothing but just enter the world, and to make sure that they have a much more equal playing ground than at times they are given. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ensei, for not only a great presentation, but your just eloquent way with words. To be honest, I felt myself kind of tearing up during some of the presentation because I know about some of these things, and some folks may know this about me. I'm still a licensed behavioral therapist, actually, but just a quick note to mention about the autism. For over 10 years in that field as a registered behavioral therapist technician, talking to BCBAs, the environmental was much higher of a talk of discussion than even vaccines, genetic, having kids later in life. Like, I think everyone in the field recognizes the environmental connection with the increase in that. And just have to say this too. It was really sad to see 1 in 4 deaths. Children under the age of 5 are associated with environmental pollution. So it's clear, we mentioned at the beginning, congregations have a huge role in advocating for and supporting your mission. We did put some links in the chat on how to connect with you, join your newsletter. We will be honored to share your events and share your information with our folks. There's a lot of good reactions, and so I will stop right there. And I want to obviously make a really nice introduction to our next keynote speaker. This is someone near and dear to the Chesapeake, actually. She's dedicated her work to creating safe and accessible green spaces through community-driven planning and conservation. And she has a love for the natural world, a deep passion for community and environmental awareness, which brought her to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, our beloved partners. We're deeply appreciative of her time and expert knowledge on tonight's topic. So everyone, please welcome Carmera.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. It's an honor to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in this way, and it's meaningful just to come together and reflect on his legacy, and talk about how we can make nature a gift meant for everyone truly accessible. So thank you so much for that introduction. Like Sarah said, I'm Carmera Thomas Wilhite. I'm the Vice President for Communities and Partnerships at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Just a little bit about myself. Next slide. Um, I've loved nature since I was a little girl, and that love turned into a passion and then a career for protecting natural landscapes, but especially for future generations. I feel the most grounded when I'm out in nature and outside, whether I'm walking my dog or camping with my husband and my friends, or out on a boat with the colleagues on the Chesapeake Bay. Nature is really a space where I can feel myself. Well, this is a great opportunity for us to do a quick reflection. Um, I want everyone to close their eyes and think about the last time that you felt at peace outdoors. Now imagine if that experience was out of reach for you or for your community. Great. So, access to nature has never been neutral. Sarah and NC also shared some really great statistics. Historically, parks and green spaces were often designed to exclude or separate groups through different laws, segregation, economic barriers. In 2023, a study showed that less than 7% of national park visitors were Black, highlighting a major gap in representation. When National Park Service was created in 1916, the U.S. was still under racial segregation, so it really shaped early access to outdoor spaces. People of color face significant discrimination in parks, limiting and segregating access, harassment or hostility while visiting those parks, or safety concerns about being out in the outdoors alone. Um, Economics also played a role in how many families lack disposable income needed for vacation or to travel to those parks. And additionally, like what was already shared about redlining, a lot of those areas in neighborhoods that were already color coded and indicated a level of risk were considered risky and then became discriminatory processes on how homes were marketed for sale. And a lot of redline neighborhoods suffered historic disinvestment. Lower property values, less trees, less parks, less amenities, and other services. These barriers helped not only keep people out, but also form a persistent stereotype that people of color, Black people in particular, don't participate in outdoor recreation. And despite a long cultural history of actually connecting to nature. These patterns did not disappear. They echo today in disparities in park access, tree canopy, environmental health, and our changing climate. Next slide. Communities without green space face higher rates of asthma, heat-related illnesses, and chronic diseases, which we heard already, especially around children and their health disparities. Also, thinking about environmental inequity, it's not just about pollution, it's also about the right to clean air, shade, clean water, and feeling safe in the outdoors. We really have an opportunity to shift access and opportunity in nature. Nature is so important. It reduces our stress, it fosters resilience, and it also deepens our spiritual connection. In many faith traditions, it is affirmed that creation is sacred and that people of all faith are called to stewardship. Faith communities can be huge advocates for park funding and green infrastructure. Churches can host outdoor events that are open to all, like nature walks and prayer in parks, reflection gardens. They can also serve as resiliency hubs for communities who are impacted like emergencies, such as flooding, have resources available. Nature is for all. Yes, that's great. Thank you. Nature is for all. It is not just a privilege to have or just an experience for some. This picture shows a labyrinth garden in at a church in Raleigh, North Carolina. Beets from a farm in Durham, North Carolina. A nature sacred bench, which I'm sure many of you know about Nature Sacred and that organization, providing really great restful and respite spaces for reflection across the Chesapeake Bay region. Um, and also just a garden that is growing vegetables at a farm. Before I came to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, I worked for an organization called the Conservation Fund, and a lot of my work, I was working with churches and other community groups to help build spaces like this so that more people could experience nature and connect to nature in a different way, especially at faith institutions that were huge advocates for community resilience and for creating spaces where people could not just have reflection and but also have resources for their community. Another practical step is just building relationships, working with environmental and conservation organizations like the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and communities who are advocating for environmental justice in schools and also with local leaders. Faith institutions can support policies that fund parks and environmental education programs, and nature spaces to protect public land. Really being a model for inclusive practices, you can create programming that honors diverse relationships and a connection to nature. Martin Luther King Jr. said that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny, because nature truly connects us all. When I think about nature and the work that I do, it's not just for myself. It really is a space that is for all people, and it's how we feel. Um, when Sarah and I spoke, this scripture really spoke to me. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. We are not only of this earth, but also have a duty and a purpose to steward it. And I can imagine a future where we all can play, and every person can walk in peace and every soul can find renewal in creation. I feel like we are all called to this vision to make it real, not just in our words, but in our actions. It is really important that not only we advocate for the spaces that we love. um, as you can tell, I love being outside and being in nature, but it is not just for me and it's not just for one group of people. It is really important that we work together in protecting our spaces, and advocating for those spaces, but also stewarding it for leaving it for future generations and not only for ourselves. I am hoping that these slides do get shared out. I shared a lot of resources and pictures in these slides, which you didn't really get to see, but really reflective of the work that is happening nationwide to support communities that are being excluded from parks, who are dealing with environmental injustice, who are advocating for themselves and for their communities. There are people in Richmond and Baltimore, Maryland, and Pennsylvania where the Chesapeake Bay Foundation works, and we connect to people and communities who are dealing with issues like flooding, who are dealing with issues of lacking access to parks and nature space. So really opening up an opportunity to connect to those communities, to share the history and the legacy and the cultural diversity of this region, and making sure that we are supporting people to have that right to clean air, clean water, and a safe environment, because it is a privilege. It is not just a privilege, it is for all people, and we should all experience that. And with that, that's my contact information, and I wanted to leave some space for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Carmera, not only for being forgiving during all of our tech
Okay.
issues that I am cringing internally over,
No, no,
but
don't.
you shared a really lovely activity. And I'm going to open up the floor in just a moment because people were definitely having some questions. But, everything that both of you have talked about really hits home. I have a young son that just entered public school. And what you ended with is it's not a privilege to be outside, right? And I'm sharing too much, but I'll say this has been a very difficult year for me with transitioning from daycare, which back to Nsei's point during her presentation, I wouldn't have been able to do it if it hadn't have been a larger family effort. So everyone helped to make sure my son could go into daycare. But anyway, it was a very outdoor daycare. And so this whole year, he's been crying about how he can't get outside. And so it's a stark reminder that the public schools sometimes, especially where I'm at, maybe don't have the best green spaces. And I do feel for all the children. It does definitely breaks my heart. So I'm glad we're all here talking about this. This is still such an important issue. There's a lot of work to be done. It is a right for everyone to have green space. And I'll end right there. So I'm going to look through the
Well,
chats, but
maybe his school can also, I'm gonna plug here, could sign up for an environmental education field trip with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We take
I would love
thousands of school children out every year
oh my
in the
goodness.
fall and in the spring, and it is really a formative experience. For so many children, they end up going through middle school, fifth grade through high school, going on different trips and experiencing that, and it really does shape them and their affinity for the outdoors, and also really sometimes change the trajectory of their life. So definitely outdoor experiences when I was young influenced mine. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I know we have other families, joining us tonight, so that's wonderful to hear. And just to make it, known, it's a privilege. Some folks have met my children. That's one of the reasons why I love IPC so much is just having them incorporated, and it has started to spur a lifelong love of the environment. So I will be happy to share that information with all of our other families as well. But yeah, just in the interest of time, please feel free to unmute folks. I'm just going to look through the chat because, like I mentioned, during both presentations, we did have some questions coming through, but I didn't want anyone to feel that they had to wait. So if someone has a pressing question, please unmute, and we can go to the gallery view. Thanks so much, Anna, for stopping sharing so we could see everyone. Let's see. There was a really good one. There was a comment by, I believe, Mo, who mentioned that during NSA's presentation that the president just signed an executive order for the EPA to no longer keep death records caused by environmental chemicals. And I know for a lot of us that are kind of like, legislative session's just about to start, right? And so we have some priorities that we'll be sharing with folks, but it's very scary to know about the lacks in regulation. And so I'm curious, do you have any information, if either one want to jump in to answer that question in terms of like where we're at and what the trajectory might look like, or if there's a way that we can, let our voices be heard on some of this lax and regulations for the chemicals.
No, yeah, thank you so much. For example, we have two, when you join us, I think that was one of the links there. If you go to our website, www.cehn.org, Children's Environmental Health Network, to the right top, it's the join us. So you can pull it down, and that's how you can decide to subscribe either to our weekly digest. What's happening out there? What are other partners doing? Updates, resources, tools. Or you can also decide once a month. It's just once a month. It's called our patron. And that is more of the conglomeration of ways. Sometimes we do this in the weekly digest if it's a time sensitive sign on letter or way that you could elevate your voice. I think this also gets to the question about how parents can also lend your voice. It's not the only way, but it's extremely powerful. Some of us have 5 minutes a day, to be honest. Some of us maybe have a little bit more time, but we all out here, us and many partners, try very hard to just make your lives easier by doing the hard work of pulling the facts together. Here's the issue. Here's why this is a concern to children and those who care for children. Here are some ways you can lend your voice. And many times now, these sign-on letters, you just go in, you put in your zip code, just like registering for this webinar. You put in maybe your city, and I think your name and maybe an email or something like that. And then it will automatically populate on our action platform, and it will populate and start sending your letters out to your elected officials. So we just try to we didn't have that years ago, right? People had to actually write letters. So we really try to take advantage of technology in the limited time people have. But the number of calls, it's not the only way. You could call, you could write a letter, you could send an email, but the number of touches that elected officials receive, even under this administration, which has been very, very challenging, that is supposed to be an indicator that, the population is extremely worried, concerned, wants information, wants transparency. So it's kind of an old playbook, but it has not gone away despite maybe what propaganda out here might have you think. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. You raising your voice, sending in that email, it really, really matters. So that's the first thing I would say. Second, again, I'll go back to we have a voting guide. We have a voter guide, and it's not just for presidential elections or midterms, it's for any county level all the way up. We all need to have a better understanding of who we're electing and what would they do to be a champion for children, just as one of many questions. You don't really see clean air, clean water, on the docket for a ballot, right? So you kind of got to really, engage and ask questions and see what would prospective candidates do. How would they do it? How would they fund it? Are they interested in nature? Are they understanding what we're talking about here? Or would this have to be a whole learning curve that, quite honestly, our kids just don't have the time for? These are urgent matters as far as I'm concerned. So it's nothing too earth shattering, but I just want to reemphasize that your time, any time that you can give, you can align with groups like us and many others, and we'll do the work, for you and give you many different ways that you can kind of plug in. As we see concerns, which it's on a daily basis at this point, and not everyone can do that, but many nonprofits like us are rallying our networks, as we see fit, and we're being very vocal with this administration and this EPA about, reducing the protections versus advancing the protections.
Thank you so much. And Carmel, did you want to add to that
I was just
before
going
we
to
go on?
add that this year during legislative session in Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation will be working with local legislators to advocate for funding for environmental education programs. It was passed last year in Maryland, and we were able to extend that funding for environmental education so that more students can have the opportunity to be exposed to to education programs, not just with CBF, but with other conservation organizations as well.
Thanks so much, because I did see another question about how can we empower parents, and I feel
Sure.
like that is the perfect way to do that. I see Sherry. Do you have your hand up? Do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, hi. My name is hi. My name is Sherry Dudas. I'm out here on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and I work for the Accomack Northampton Planning District Commission. And I just wanted to kind of address not only the decrease in federal funding for some projects, but some areas that people might want to look into for community tree planting work. So in our office, we had a number of federal programs just, I can't even say defunded. They're just, the federal government isn't communicating with us. One of those projects is the Eastern Shore Rail Trail. So we have a rail trail that is going to connect miles of former railroad tracks into a rail trail. And we have a section that is a missing link, so to speak, and we had put in for a federal grant, and we're not getting any communication about that. So we turned around and we looked at what other resources are out there to do work on the rail trail. And the good news is the Department of Forestry, the Virginia Department of Forestry, has a community and urban, the community and urban farm, no, I'm sorry, urban forestry program. And they've given us a $90,000 grant to plant trees along the rail trail. Or if any of you are familiar with the location of the Eastern Shore Rail Trail, and with many early rail trails, they lack trees because it was a railroad bed, and they still do in some cases use pesticides to remove any vegetation and whatnot. So we're in the process of planting trees in the neighborhood of Bird's Nest, Virginia, which is an important African-American community, has a lot of historic relevance in our area. So for those parents that are looking for things that they could do, one of the projects that the urban forestry program allows is for private residents to come together in community and apply for trees to be planted, whether it be your church, your neighborhood, it could be just your street in your neighborhood. And if you're on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, the foresters that I've worked with feel like we haven't had sort of our share of the funds for that are available through that program. The application I found to be really easy. So I'm just saying there's things that can be done at the Commonwealth level versus the federal level. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing that. We're also always looking to partner more in Virginia as we're able to. If you have any information, please put that in the chat for folks that might be joining from the area. I want to be very mindful of time. Our gracious keynote speakers, I don't have them much longer. Was there any other pressing question? And thanks so much, Ensei, for putting that training mention. And so, yeah, we'll be happy to share that out with our network. And if any other links you have for particular events, you too as well, Carmera, we'll put those in our post recording email blast. It'll go to everyone that registered. So yeah, are there any other questions before we close the program? And also I'm seeing a familiar face, a friend that I have to just make a mention of before we go into next question, because she's from Serenity Ridge now, used to be a very close colleague. And I love this place. It's actually, correct me, Bonnie, it was like the first green burial in Maryland. So yeah, actually,
first 100% green burial
yeah.
cemetery. Yes.
I hope to be turned into a tree one day. So that's just in terms of green spaces and bringing it back. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Anna. This is I really do like this. This is an adaptation. It was just something that I've had for a while. I've used it in previous learning labs, and it's from it's cut. No, it is. Okay, perfect. I was going to say it's from Rabbi Daniel Nevins. It's Master of the Universe, in whose hands is the breath of all life and soul for every person. Grant us the gift of Sabbath, a day of rest from all our labors. With all of our senses, may we perceive the glory of your works. Fill us with your goodness, that we may attest to your good deeds. Strengthen us to become your faithful partners, preserving the world for the sake of future generations. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to renew your blessing for the world and our day, as you have done from the beginning of time. And so thank you all so much for joining us.